Ryan Bennett was a 24-year-old young man with a rare musical talent and an immense passion for the piano. He lived in Chicago and spent his days playing on the streets, especially in busy spots like the front of the train station and the corners near the most popular cafes. His music was unmistakable, a mix of classical pieces and his own compositions that he performed with a depth and mastery that caught the attention of anyone who passed by. People of all ages stopped to listen to him play, often enveloped by the melody that came from the keyboard as an extension of their emotions. Despite the cold, rain, and unpredictable street conditions, Ryan never stopped playing, as music was his refuge and his reason for existing. Ryan's journey with the piano began improvised. He never had the opportunity to attend a music school or take formal lessons. His learning took place in a self-taught way since childhood. At the age of 5, his grandfather, a former musician, gave him an old keyboard, and it was with that gift that Ryan began his journey. He spent hours trying to reproduce songs and trying to discover the secrets that those keys held. Over time, he developed his own technique and created a unique style, a mix of classic techniques and modern touches, all by ear and with a lot of dedication. For Ryan, the piano was a connection to something bigger, perhaps even to a part of himself he didn't yet fully understand. Despite his talent, Ryan's life was not easy. He lived modestly and faced financial difficulties to stay in Chicago, a vibrant city, but one that demanded a lot from those trying to make a career in the arts. The income he earned on the streets was uncertain and depended on the generosity of passersby, which often left him insecure about the future. However, he never considered abandoning music, as he knew that playing was what gave his life meaning. Even when tips were scarce and the city's cold punished his hands, he remained steadfast in his decision to move forward. For him, each note was a message to the world, and the street was his stage, where he could play without reservation, free from the constraints and demands of formal spaces. One afternoon, while performing one of his more introspective compositions, a well-dressed, elegant-looking woman stopped to listen. Her name was Madeline Lawrence, and she was the owner of Harmonia, a renowned Chicago restaurant that was also known for encouraging and valuing local artists. Madeline was an arts lover and often looked for ways to incorporate music into her restaurant, believing that the combination of good food and good music provided a unique experience for customers. Hearing Ryan, she froze. The melody seemed to touch her deeply, awakening an emotion that had been dormant for some time. Madeline felt that this young man had something special, a connection to music that was rare to find. Madeline approached Ryan at the end of the performance and introduced herself, saying that she was enchanted by his music. She invited him to play at a special night at Harmonia, an event she planned for her best clients. Ryan was surprised and thrilled by the invitation. Never before had he received an offer to perform in such a prestigious venue. Although he was used to the streets, he saw Madeline's offer as a chance to expand his horizons and show his music to a different audience. After thinking for a few seconds, he accepted the invitation, feeling that this was a unique opportunity, perhaps the first step towards his dream of making a living from music. In the following days, Ryan prepared intensely for his performance on Harmonia. Although he had a vast repertoire and used to improvise easily, he wanted that night to be special. I knew that the public would be demanding and that, in Madeline's restaurant, every detail mattered. He carefully chose the songs he would play, including some of his own compositions that conveyed his emotions and his past. He also practiced overtime to make sure every note was perfect, that every chord expressed what he wanted to convey. He felt that night was his chance to impress and, more than that, to be recognized as a true musician. When the big day arrived, Harmonia was full of customers, all elegantly dressed and curious about the young street pianist that Madeline had brought to play. Ryan arrived early, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. The restaurant's refined ambience was unlike any other he had ever been to. He took a deep breath and let himself be guided to the stage, where a grand piano was waiting for him. Madeline greeted him with a warm, encouraging smile, reminding him that she was there because she believed in his talent. Sitting at the piano, Ryan closed his eyes and let his hands do the work he had practiced for so long. And then he started playing. As the melody echoed throughout the hall, An immersive atmosphere took over the room. Each note seemed to float, as if it had a life of its own. Ryan played with intensity, transmitting everything he felt, everything he had experienced up until that moment. Madeline, who was watching from the front row, was overcome by a wave of emotion. The melody he played was the same one that a great love from her youth had composed for her, a song she never expected to hear again. Without realizing it, tears began to stream down Madeline's face. That song was a piece of his past, a memory that he always carried with him, but that he believed was lost in time. As Ryan played, Madeline let herself be enveloped by the melody, which transported her to a moment in her life that she thought had been forgotten. That song was special because it was composed for her by someone who had a profound impact on her youth. She remembered Daniel Foster, a talented and dreamy pianist, with whom she had a rapturous but brief romance. Daniel, like Ryan, was someone who put his soul into every note. He had composed that melody for her on a farewell night before they parted forever. At the time, Madeline and Daniel were forced to follow different paths due to family pressures and professional choices. Madeline watched Ryan play, and the more she listened, the more she became convinced that this young man had a connection with Daniel. It wasn't just the music, but the way he played, the intensity and feeling he expressed, that felt like a replica of Daniel's style. A series of questions began to arise in his mind. Who was Ryan? Where did he come from? And how had he learned that melody Daniel composed just for her? Madeline felt overcome by a mixture of emotion and curiosity, as this unknown young man seemed to carry a part of her past that she never imagined she would encounter again. At the end of the performance, the restaurant was in profound silence for a few seconds, until the audience began to applaud enthusiastically. Ryan, still moved by the intensity with which he had played, stood up and thanked him, surprised and happy with the warm welcome. Madeline then approached him and, with teary eyes, asked where he had learned that melody. Ryan, without understanding the intensity of the question, replied that it was a composition inspired by the few memories he had of his father, a pianist who played in Chicago years ago and who had passed away when he was still little. Ryan's revelation left Madeline stunned. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Ryan's father's name was Daniel Foster, the same man with whom she had lived that unforgettable romance. Suddenly, everything made sense. The music, the emotion, the intensity with which he played. Ryan was Daniel's son, the great love of her youth, the man who composed that special melody just for her. Madeline felt an avalanche of emotions. Surprise, longing, and an aching joy knowing that, somehow, Daniel was still alive through Ryan and his music. Madeline told Ryan about her relationship with Daniel, about how he had enchanted her with his music and his passionate personality. She related, in detail, the love story they lived and the pain of separation that they both faced. For Ryan, it was a shock to find out so much about his father from a stranger. He had always heard vague stories about Daniel, but had never really known who he was. Listening to Madeline, he felt that, for the first time, he was getting to know the human side of his father, the man he never had the chance to meet, but had always admired from afar. Madeline, still emotional, showed Ryan an old photo of her with Daniel, where he was at the piano and she was watching him with a passionate smile. Ryan looked at the photo with reverence, almost as if it were a reunion with his father. He felt even more connected to Daniel and the music he played now that he knew the origin of that special melody. For him, discovering his story through Madeline was something that brought unexpected peace, a way to rescue the memories he was looking for so much. Madeline, in turn, saw in Ryan a continuation of her lost love, a part of Daniel that still pulsed through music. Madeline and Ryan decided they needed to honor Daniel's memory in some special way. They both felt it was necessary to share his story with the world, celebrating the musical legacy he left behind and the connection he created between them, even after so many years. Madeline suggested organizing a tribute night to Daniel at the restaurant, where Ryan could play the melody composed by his father and, thus, convey the intensity of that story to the public. Ryan accepted the idea with enthusiasm and gratitude, as he felt that by doing so he would finally be honoring his father's memory and his musical heritage. The following days were of intense preparation. Ryan dedicated himself even more to the piano, seeking perfection in every note, and Madeline took care of the details of the event, ensuring that everything reflected Daniel's essence. For both, that tribute was a way to rescue the past, to immortalize Daniel's story, and to express everything that music represented. Harmonia was preparing for a special night, and everyone felt that something extraordinary was about to happen. After the decision to hold the tribute to Daniel Foster, Madeline and Ryan dedicated themselves intensely to the preparations. Madeline, with years of experience in organizing refined events for the restaurant, wanted this evening to be unforgettable, full of beauty and details that paid homage not only to Daniel's talent, but also to the soul of an artist whose music still resonates through her son. She took care of every aspect of the decor, colors, and lighting, opting for tones that evoke an atmosphere of longing and reverence. Between the tables, he placed old photos of Daniel, alongside sheet music and instruments he used to use. Every detail was thought out so that the event reflected the intensity of that love for music that connected her and Ryan to Daniel. While Madeline took care of the visual and logistical preparations, Ryan spent hours rehearsing. He was determined to play perfectly, not only for the audience, but mainly in honor of the father he never met in person. Every time his fingers touched the keyboard, he focused on channeling all the love and longing he felt. For him, that night was more than a performance. It was a silent conversation between him and his father. He relived, with every note, the stories he had heard from Madeline and his mother, stories that had once seemed distant but now took shape in his mind as clear, vivid images. Music was his direct link to Daniel, an invisible but deeply real heritage. In the days leading up to the event, Madeline and Ryan talked a lot about Daniel. Madeline revealed to him memories that she had kept for years, moments that she had shared with Daniel and that, for her, were like treasures. He told Ryan about the first time he saw him play, the way he devoted himself to the piano, forgetting everything around him, completely immersed in the melody. He also spoke about the dreams they had of building a life together, the plans they made and the songs he composed inspired by their love. These conversations brought Madeline and Ryan even closer, who now saw themselves almost as family, united not only by the present, but by a history that seemed to transcend time. Ryan, inspired by Madeline's stories, decided to compose a new piece especially for that night. He felt this was the best way to honor his father's memory and show the public how much that connection meant to him. In his hours of practice, he dedicated himself to creating a melody that reflected Daniel's entire journey. The moments of joy, the difficulties, and, above all, his love for music and his family. He wanted everyone, when listening to this piece, to feel Daniel's presence in the room, as if he were there, among them. For Ryan, this was a way to immortalize his father's legacy and assert his own identity as a musician. On the day of the event, Harmonia was decorated with candles, flowers, and memories of Daniel spread throughout the room. The environment reflected the story of a love and passion for music that now came to life through Ryan. Daniel's old friends, many of them musicians, came to pay their respects. They not only remembered Daniel fondly, but also wanted to meet the young man who brought with him the talent and spirit of their old friend. Each person there carried a memory, a story, or an admiration for Daniel's music, and the expectation for Ryan's performance was enormous. Madeline, looking around the room filled with Daniel's friends and admirers, felt a mixture of nostalgia and fulfillment. She knew that night meant a lot, not just to her and Ryan, but to everyone who remembered Daniel's brilliance and intensity as a musician and as a person. Before the presentation began, she gave a brief speech, thanking everyone for coming and sharing a little about what the tribute meant to her. With a shaky voice and teary eyes, he talked about how Daniel's love of music and the piano was what brought them together that night, and that, in some way, he was still there through Ryan. When it was time for Ryan to take the stage, the room fell into profound silence. He took a deep breath and let the emotion guide him to the piano. He looked at the audience and found Madeline, who gave him an encouraging smile. The young pianist closed his eyes and let his fingers touch the keys, sliding over them with the same intensity with which he had rehearsed. The first melody was the piece that Daniel composed for Madeline years ago, the same one that he played in the streets and that had moved the owner the first time she heard it. That music, familiar and powerful, took over the environment, involved each person present, and brought Daniel's spirit into the room. As the melody progressed, the audience was overcome with a feeling of deep emotion. Each note seemed to carry a piece of Daniel's story, a piece of the love he and Madeline shared and the legacy he left for his son. Ryan played from the heart, letting memories of his father flow through him, as if, through the music, he could feel his presence. Madeline, sitting in the front row, watched Ryan's every move with tears in her eyes, feeling that, somehow, Daniel was there, sharing that moment with her and everyone who loved his music. As Ryan played, the audience seemed enveloped by an aura of longing and reverence. It was as if each note echoed the emotions and memories of everyone who knew Daniel, creating an invisible bridge between the past and the present. Madeline watched the young man attentively, remembering how Daniel played in a similar way, with the same fervor and the same dedication. For her, seeing Ryan there, playing in harmonia in honor of her father, was like reliving those moments that marked her youth. At the same time, he felt like he was creating new memories, now with the son of the man he loved so much. When Ryan completed the first piece, a long and respectful silence filled the hall, before being broken by warm applause. He stood up and gave a small bow, feeling grateful for the public's recognition. Then he announced a special piece he had composed in honor of Daniel, his father. He explained that this composition was not only a tribute, but also an attempt to translate into music the love and gratitude he felt, even though he had never met him. Music, for Ryan, was a way of immortalizing the figure of his father and honoring the legacy he had left. As the new piece began to play, the melody emerged with a moving smoothness and depth. Ryan let himself be guided by the music, letting his emotions carry him. Each chord seemed to capture an aspect of Daniel's life, from his dreams to his struggles and ultimately the love he had for music and the people who crossed his path. For Madeline, it was as if each note revealed a new detail of the story she had shared with Daniel. She was moved to realize that Ryan had managed to capture the essence of her father, conveying something that was both unique and universal. During the presentation, some of Daniel's friends shared stories and memories about him, creating an atmosphere of celebration and longing. They talked about the days of their youth, the nights they played together, and the charisma that made Daniel an unforgettable person. These reports deeply touched Ryan, who felt even closer to his father. For the first time, he felt like he had a more intimate knowledge of Daniel, not just as a distant figure, but as a human being with dreams, flaws, and emotions. This process of discovery was transformative for him, as it allowed him, through music, to keep his father's memory alive. When Ryan finished the performance, the audience erupted in applause, some rising to give a standing ovation. Madeline, moved, went to the stage and hugged Ryan, feeling that this tribute had fulfilled its purpose of honoring Daniel in an authentic and profound way. For her, seeing the son of her great love follow the same musical path was a form of reunion, a second chance to connect with Daniel. She felt that, through Ryan, she could keep alive the memories and emotions that music had always awakened in her. After the performance, Ryan and Madeline gathered with Daniel's friends to share stories and memories. Ryan listened intently, learning more about his father than he ever knew. Each account added a new layer to the image he had of Daniel, completing the puzzle of his life with pieces he didn't even know were missing. For him, this night was more than a tribute. It was a journey of self-discovery and understanding about his own past and the origins of his love for the piano. The night ended with an atmosphere of unity and gratitude, with everyone saying goodbye to Ryan and Madeline with words of encouragement and emotion. For many, this was not just a night of tribute. It was an opportunity to reconnect with the past, to celebrate music, and to remember the importance of the people who impacted their lives. Ryan, although exhausted, felt deeply fulfilled. He knew that night had changed his life, not just his career, but his soul. The tribute to Daniel Foster was now a treasured memory, an event that would inspire and guide him for years to come. For Madeline, that tribute brought a sense of peace that she never imagined she would achieve. The longing for Daniel had always accompanied her, but seeing Ryan there, playing with the same fervor and the same passion, was as if the cycle of love and music they lived was complete. Madeline knew that, even after so many years, the love she shared with Daniel lived on, not only in her memories, but also in Ryan's music, which was now part of her own story. After Daniel's tribute night, Ryan and Madeline felt their bond had become even deeper. For both, that event represented an emotional and spiritual turning point. Madeline began to see in Ryan a kind of continuation of Daniel, but she also realized that the young man was unique, with his own talent and a soul that, although connected to his father's, carried traits that were his own. Ryan, in turn, began to see Madeline as more than a restaurant owner. She was now a keeper of her father's stories, someone who not only understood his love of music, but who also preserved Daniel's memories with an intensity he never imagined he would find. In their post-tribute conversations, Madeline and Ryan increasingly explored Daniel's memories and reflected on the way music seemed to bring their lives together. Madeline told jokes about Daniel's peculiar habits, such as the fact that he only composed in the early hours of the morning, when the world was quiet and he could lose himself in the melodies without interruption. She also shared the insecurities he faced as a musician, the doubts that arose about his abilities, and the incessant search for perfection. For Ryan, hearing these stories brought a new layer of understanding about his father and, at the same time, made him reflect on his own ambitions and fears. The tribute not only deepened the bond between Madeline and Ryan, but also inspired the young man to explore his musical abilities more broadly. He began to realize that music was his way of expressing deep emotions that he might never be able to put into words. From then on, Ryan began composing more frequently, seeking inspiration from both Madeline's stories and his own experiences and memories. He realized that music not only connected past and present, but also brought about a form of healing, allowing him to process his longings and unresolved issues with his father. Madeline, who had always dedicated herself to keeping Daniel's memory alive, now saw in Ryan the opportunity to build new memories. She encouraged the young man to perform more often at Harmonia, offering him a safe stage where he could develop and share his talent. Watching Ryan's enthusiasm grow with each performance, Madeline felt a deep joy, as if she was finally accomplishing something Daniel would have wanted too. Every time the young man played, she saw a little of her youthful love in the boy's hands and heart, and this brought her a comfort that, until then, seemed impossible to achieve. Ryan's regular appearances on Harmonia began to attract a loyal following. People who had attended the tribute and new attendees became admirers of his music, enchanted by the talent and passion he conveyed in every note. The restaurant, which had always had a welcoming and sophisticated atmosphere, was now also seen as a reference point for live music lovers. Madeline proudly watched Ryan's growth as an artist and knew he was on a successful path. Seeing the restaurant come to life even more with Ryan's presence was a personal achievement for her, a confirmation that her dedication to art and Daniel's memory was being rewarded. As Ryan established himself as a pianist, Madeline encouraged him to explore new possibilities for his career. She introduced him to local musicians, event organizers, and producers, always looking for ways to expand opportunities for young people. For her, it was a pleasure and an honor to help him grow and find his space in the world of music. Each performance was a chance for Ryan to gain more visibility and to strengthen his confidence as a musician. He noticed Madeline's effort and affection and was grateful to have found someone who believed in his talent as much as he did. On one of their dates, Madeline presented Ryan with an old sheet music notebook that had belonged to Daniel. Inside it, there were handwritten notes, composition ideas, and even some excerpts from unfinished songs. Madeline explained that she had kept the notebook all those years, but now felt it belonged to Ryan, the rightful heir to her father's legacy. Upon receiving the gift, Ryan was thrilled and grateful. Each page was a piece of her father's past, a new window into understanding the man she so admired. For him, that notebook represented an unbreakable link, proof that his music was connected to something bigger, something that transcended time. Ryan decided that he would use the notebook to continue some of the compositions that Daniel had left unfinished. He felt that, by completing those melodies, he was continuing his father's dream, honoring his talent and also developing his own musical identity. Madeline encouraged him to work on these compositions, stating that Daniel would be proud to see his son carrying his work forward. Thus, The sheet music notebook became a symbolic object for Ryan, something he used as a source of inspiration and strength. Every note he wrote seemed guided by an invisible hand, and he felt his father's presence closer than ever. As the months went by, Ryan's talent gained more notoriety. His performances at Harmonia attracted more and more attention, and praise for the young pianist spread throughout the city. Music critics and local journalists began to attend his performances, impressed by his skill and the emotional depth he conveyed in each performance. For Ryan, it was surprising to realize that his music, which was previously only shared on the streets, was now gaining praise and recognition from professionals in the field. He felt that, finally, his dream of making a living from music was becoming a reality, and Madeline's presence by his side motivated him to continue. Madeline, always attentive to Ryan's growth, realized that he was ready to take even greater heights. In a frank conversation, he suggested that he consider recording an album of his compositions, a way to record his talent and expand his reach beyond live performances. She knew some music producers and offered to help with whatever was necessary to make this project happen. Ryan, although a little intimidated by the idea, accepted the challenge. He felt that this was an opportunity to immortalize his music, and he knew that his father would be proud to see him move forward with determination. With Madeline's support, Ryan began working on producing his first album. The project included not only his own compositions, but also some of Daniel's unfinished pieces that he had completed using the sheet music notebook. For Ryan, recording those songs was a way to honor his father's legacy and keep the connection between past and present alive. He dedicated himself intensely to the recording process, seeking to capture all the emotion and passion that motivated him. Each track on the album was an authentic expression of her journey, a reflection of her years of dedication to music and discovery of her family history. During the recording process, Ryan was surprised to discover that many of Daniel's compositions seemed to have been written with him in mind. The melodies and harmonies seemed to echo feelings that he also carried, such as the search for a purpose and the attempt to express what words could not say. Working with those scores was like having a conversation with your father, an exchange of emotions and ideas that transcended time. Madeline followed each step of the project with enthusiasm, feeling grateful to see Daniel's legacy continued through Ryan's talent. For her, the album was not just a collection of songs, but a celebration of Daniel's musical heritage. Finally, after months of hard work, the album was ready. Ryan decided to call it Kaminho's Entre Notas, in honor of the journey that had led him there and the discoveries he had made about his origins and his talent. The first track was the melody that Daniel had composed for Madeline, a piece that now took on new meaning when reinterpreted by Ryan. Upon hearing the full album for the first time, Madeline couldn't hold back her tears. For her, this was the end of a cycle, the realization of a dream that began in her youth and that now, decades later, was finally coming to fruition through Daniel's son. The album launch was an exciting event at Harmonia. Madeline hosted a special evening to introduce Ryan's work to the public. Friends, family, music critics, and frequent customers of the restaurant came to honor the young pianist. Ryan took the stage, nervous but also confident, and played some of the tracks live, moving everyone. At the end of each song, the audience applauded warmly, showing their support and admiration. Madeline, who was watching from the front row, felt radiant. I knew that somehow Daniel was also there witnessing that moment. The album was well received by the public and critics, and soon Ryan began to receive invitations to play elsewhere. He was invited to perform at music festivals and events dedicated to young talents. The story of the tribute to Daniel and the meeting between Ryan and Madeline was mentioned in several interviews, which drew even more attention to his work. Ryan felt that although his journey as a musician was just beginning, he had already achieved one of the most important goals in his life, honoring his father's memory and authentically following his own path. For Madeline, seeing Ryan thrive was like watching a long-held dream come true. She continued to support him, but knew he was now ready to go his own way. Proud and satisfied, she watched each new step he took with joy and gratitude. I knew that no matter what path Ryan chose to take, the connection they built would never be broken. The love for music, The respect for Daniel and the friendship they built were the foundations of a relationship that transcended time and distance. After the release of his album, Ryan's career began to take off. He received invitations to perform at several music festivals across the country and even in some cities in Europe. Each new invitation was an opportunity to expand his horizons and share his music with an ever wider audience. Ryan felt like he was finally realizing the dream he always carried with him, but never believed was truly possible. Madeline, who accompanied him in the first steps of this new phase, felt immense pride, as if she were seeing Daniel at every Ryan performance. She knew that although the young man went his own way, the spirit of his former love lived on in the music Ryan brought to the world. During these travels and performances, Ryan met other musicians and composers who inspired him to explore new ways of composing and playing. He experimented with different styles, mixing classic with modern and inserting elements of street music, where it all started for him. Each new experience was an addition to his emotional and artistic repertoire, and he felt that his identity as a musician was solidifying. By performing in such diverse venues, from luxurious theaters to open-air festivals, Ryan realized that music was a universal language, capable of touching people of all cultures and backgrounds. This understanding motivated him to continue exploring and innovating, keeping his father's heritage alive while creating something unique. At one of his international performances, Ryan encountered an older man who, at the end of the performance, approached him with an emotional expression. He introduced himself as Leonard Foster, Daniel's brother, and Ryan's uncle. Until that moment, Ryan didn't know he had any living relatives on his father's side. The revelation took him by surprise, and a series of intense feelings took over him. Leonard said that he learned about Ryan's story through interviews and articles about the album, and that he was impressed by his nephew's talent and the similarities he had with Daniel. For Ryan, meeting Leonard was a new way to connect with his roots and understand more about his father's life. The relationship with Leonard brought new stories about Daniel to light. Leonard, who was also a musician, told Ryan about his father's childhood and youth, about the challenges he faced when choosing an artistic career, and about the support he always sought from his family. For Ryan, hearing these stories was like filling in the gaps in a narrative that, for a long time, had been fragmented. Leonard revealed details about Daniel's personality, his persistence, and his love for music. With each story, Ryan felt closer to his father and more aware of the path he chose to follow. It was as if he was finally fully understanding who Daniel Foster was. Madeline was thrilled to learn that Ryan had met his uncle. She encouraged him to stay in touch with Leonard and take advantage of this family connection that, until then, he was unaware of. For her, it was a pleasure to see Ryan surrounded by people who shared Daniel's passion for music. I knew that these connections were precious and that, in a way, they would help Ryan grow even more as a person and as a musician. Madeline understood that the more the young man knew about his past, the stronger his future would be, as the support and love of his family, even if discovered late, were a solid foundation in his life. Over time, Ryan and Leonard developed a close and inspiring relationship. Leonard offered advice and also taught his nephew musical techniques that he and Daniel practiced together. This learning was valuable to Ryan because it allowed him to feel more connected to his father while also expanding his skills. The two played together on some occasions, reviving songs that Daniel composed and that Leonard knew by heart. These music sessions were emotional, almost like a kind of silent tribute to Daniel, a moment where the two paid homage to the man who had impacted their lives so much, albeit in different ways. Ryan decided to invite Leonard to participate in one of his Harmonia performances. Madeline organized a special night for the event, promoting the presentation as a meeting of generations. The idea was to celebrate not only Ryan's talent, but the continuity of Daniel's legacy through the music that united uncle and nephew. The performance was a success, and seeing the two playing together moved the audience, who connected with the story of that family dedicated to music. For Ryan, playing alongside Leonard was an indescribable experience, as he felt that, in some way, he was honoring his father in a full and unique way. As the months went by, Ryan continued to perform and travel, but always returned to Harmonia, where he felt at home. With each new discovery about his father's past, he added elements to his compositions, paying homage to the history that formed and inspired him. Madeline, Leonard, and he maintained a close and loving relationship, supporting each other and celebrating Daniel's memory through music. For Ryan, this was proof that love and music transcend generations and that, even after so long, he was connected to his family roots in a deep and meaningful way. With his career on the rise and Daniel's music incorporated into his repertoire, Ryan began thinking about new projects. He felt that his journey was not complete and that there was more to be explored. Inspired by his father's stories and conversations with Madeline and Leonard, he decided he wanted to create an album dedicated to Daniel's unfinished songs. This album, he thought, would not just be a tribute, but a way to complete the work his father started. Alongside Leonard, Ryan dedicated himself to studying the scores and notes that Daniel left behind, seeking to capture the spirit of each melody and complete them with his own musical vision. The new album project has brought new purpose to Ryan's life. He spent entire days studying the scores, reliving the emotions that his father had tried to express and reflecting on how to continue that work. In many of these sessions, Madeline accompanied him, sharing her perspective on what Daniel intended with each composition. Together, they discussed details, nuances, and emotions, trying to ensure that the album reflected Daniel's essence and, at the same time, Ryan's unique style. For him, this was the most challenging and personal project he had ever undertaken, as he felt that he was not only giving voice to his father, but also finding his own musical voice. Leonard was also deeply involved in the album's production, offering technical and emotional guidance to Ryan. They discussed and experimented with the compositions, tweaking the scores and testing different arrangements until everything sounded harmonious. Each melody brought a memory, a story, or a feeling that they sought to translate into music. For Leonard, working alongside Ryan was a way to relive memories with his brother, and he was grateful to be able to help Daniel's legacy live on. The recording sessions were emotional, full of stories and laughter, and reinforced the bond they had built. Madeline watched the entire creation process with a mixture of pride and emotion. For her, seeing young Ryan dedicate himself to completing Daniel's work was a gift, a chance to relive the love she always carried in her heart. Madeline knew that by helping Ryan carry out this project, she was preserving the memory of the man who impacted her life. And although time had passed, she felt that that love, now expressed through Ryan's music, had never really gone away. For her, the album represented an eternal connection between past and present, a link that transcended time and space. When the album was finally ready, Ryan decided to release it on a special night at Harmonia. He wanted the place that housed so many memories of his father to also be the stage for the continuity of his work. Madeline organized the event with care, inviting friends, family, and admirers of Daniel and Ryan. Leonard also participated in the preparation, bringing Daniel's old colleagues and ensuring that the night was a true tribute. The restaurant was decorated with Daniel's scores, and a video with old photos of the Foster family was shown, moving everyone and preparing the audience for the performance that would follow. On the night of the launch, Harmonia was packed, and the excitement was palpable in the air. Ryan took the stage alongside Leonard, and together they played songs from the album, each note carrying the weight and love of the entire family story. The audience, silent and attentive, listened to the compositions with reverence, feeling Daniel's presence through the music. For Ryan, that performance was the culmination of his journey so far, a moment where all the pieces of his life fell into place. He felt that he had finally honored his father in the way he always wanted, and that his own identity as a musician was complete. After the performance, many of those in attendance came forward to congratulate Ryan and share their own memories of Daniel. For those who knew him, the album was more than a work of art. It was a celebration of the life of a friend and an extraordinary musician. Leonard and Madeline, emotional, hugged Ryan and expressed their gratitude and pride. For them, that night was proof that Daniel's memory would live forever, not only in the scores and songs, but also in the hearts of everyone who was touched by his talent and his story. With the album's release, Ryan felt that an important cycle had come to an end, but he also realized that his own musical path was just beginning. He knew he now had a responsibility to maintain his family's legacy, but also to expand his own journey as a musician. Madeline and Leonard remained by his side, supporting each new project and every decision. For Ryan, that bond with them was the greatest gift music gave him, proof that love and art have the power to unite people, to preserve memories and to transcend time. After the release of the album dedicated to Daniel's unfinished songs, Ryan received recognition beyond his expectations. The album, full of memories and emotion, began to attract the attention of renowned critics and musicians. The stories behind the songs are the legacy left by Daniel, the unexpected meeting with Madeline and Ryan's journey of self-discovery, were part of a plot that touched the audience deeply. Journalists and specialized magazines published articles about the album, highlighting the emotional strength and authenticity of the compositions. For Ryan, seeing his and his father's work receiving such acclaim was a surreal experience. He had never imagined that by following Daniel's path he could reach so many people and inspire them with his music. With growing recognition, Ryan began to be invited to perform at international festivals and iconic theaters around the world. For him, this was an opportunity to further expand his father's legacy and share the Foster family story on a larger scale. Each performance outside of Chicago brought new experiences and challenges. In a special performance at Carnegie Hall, in New York, Ryan moved the audience by playing Daniel's songs and telling the story behind each of them. He described how the piano was the invisible link that connected him to his father, and how his music represented the continuation of something that transcends time. Madeline and Leonard, who accompanied him at every step of this new phase, felt immensely proud. For Madeline, seeing Ryan conquer the world was like a dream come true. She never imagined that Daniel's melodies, which touched her so much in the past, would now reach so many hearts through her son's talent. For Leonard, this phase of success also represented a personal victory, as he knew that Daniel would be extremely proud to see Ryan taking the family's music to such great heights. The two remained by Ryan's side, offering emotional support and following each achievement with joy and gratitude. As he established himself as a pianist and composer, Ryan also felt a greater responsibility to maintain authenticity and honesty in his music. He knew that the public admired him not only for his talent, but for the depth with which he expressed his emotions. The songs he played were more than just melodies. They carried stories, feelings, and a family connection. When performing, Ryan was careful to convey that essence, to keep Daniel's story alive while expanding his own musical identity. He realized that his talent was not just his own, but a heritage that he had a responsibility to honor. Madeline, realizing Ryan's positive impact, decided to organize a new annual event at Harmonia called Foster Nights. The event would honor Daniel and other local musicians who, like him, dedicated their lives to art. For Madeline, this was a way to celebrate Daniel's memory and maintain her restaurant as a space to support music. Ryan, always involved, played at Foster Nights alongside other musicians and young talents, inspiring them with his story and offering a helping hand. The event attracted the attention of new artists and became a meeting place for those looking to keep music alive in Chicago. Over time, Ryan became a mentor to young musicians, sharing with them not only his technique, but also the teachings he learned from his family's history. He was happy to see new talent emerging and to be able to offer the same kind of encouragement he received from Madeline and Leonard. For him, each student was a memory of the beginning of his own journey, of the hours spent on the streets of Chicago, and of the way music has always been his main expression. By teaching and guiding other musicians, Ryan felt he was building something bigger than himself, a continuity of love for music that he hoped would endure. Ryan also began composing new pieces, inspired by different stages of his life. These songs spoke of meetings, of longing, of reunions, and of a love that transcends time. Each piece was a sincere expression of his feelings and everything he had learned about himself and his family. These compositions, although full of his own essence, always had a touch of Daniel, as if his father was still present in every note, guiding and inspiring him. For Ryan, each new composition was a way to honor not only his father, but also the journey he and Madeline took together. Madeline, who followed each new phase of Ryan with pride, knew that the young man had fulfilled his purpose and more. As she watched Ryan grow into a renowned musician and a guide to others, she realized that Daniel's legacy was truly alive and present in every aspect of Ryan's life. She also understood that the bond that united them, even without a biological connection, was unbreakable and eternal. Ryan, now a respected and accomplished pianist, knew that each new achievement was the result of a story that began long before he was born. A story of love, dedication, and music that would always inspire him to move forward. Over the years, the story of Ryan, Daniel, and Madeline has become known as a true legend in the Chicago music scene. Foster Nights has grown into a much-anticipated and beloved community event, with new and seasoned musicians coming together to celebrate the love of music and legacy left by Daniel Foster. Madeline continued to manage Harmonia, now certain that the restaurant would be a landmark not only for those who loved good food, but also for music lovers. Each night dedicated to Daniel's memory was proof that art has the power to immortalize feelings and unite generations. Ryan, in turn, continued his career with steady success, respected for his authenticity and his ability to touch people with his music. In each performance, he carried the weight and responsibility of his father's legacy, but also the lightness of someone who has found their true purpose. Over time, he began to explore other areas of music, composing scores for films and plays, further expanding his trajectory. However, he always returned to the piano and the style he inherited from Daniel, keeping alive the invisible link that united his story with his father's. As she got older, Madeline decided it was time to start preparing Ryan to take over the Harmonia restaurant. For her, this was more than a question of succession. It was a way to ensure the venue remained true to Daniel's essence and the musical spirit she always sought to preserve. Ryan honored, accepted the challenge, and together they began planning the transition. He knew that, like music, Harmonia was an inseparable part of his family history. Taking care of the restaurant and maintaining it as a sanctuary of music and memory was a responsibility he carried with gratitude. When he finally took over the management of Harmonia, Ryan maintained traditions and created new projects, including music classes for young talents who did not have access to formal education. Inspired by his own story, he sought to provide opportunities for those, like him, who possessed talent but lacked the resources to develop it. Madeline, now retired, watched closely, feeling proud and moved to see how the restaurant and Daniel's memory were preserved with so much love. For her, seeing Ryan as the new guardian of Harmonia was confirmation that the love and dedication she had dedicated to him and Daniel were never in vain. Over the years, Ryan continued composing and performing, always carrying with him his father's sheet music notebook and memories of Madeline and Leonard. Each new phase of his life was a celebration of his family's legacy and an expansion of his own trajectory. He got married, had children, and taught them the value of music and the stories that came before them. For Ryan, each new generation was an opportunity to continue the legacy and ensure that Daniel's memory would never fade. His children grew up listening to their grandfather's music and eventually began playing the piano, continuing a legacy that transcends time. Years passed, and Madeline, now elderly, knew that her journey was coming to an end. In her last moments, she called Ryan to her side and expressed her gratitude for everything he had done to keep Daniel's memory alive. For Madeline, Ryan was proof that love and music were capable of transforming lives and leaving eternal marks. With tears in his eyes, Ryan thanked her for everything she had taught him and promised that he would never let his father's legacy be forgotten. Madeline left in peace, with the certainty that the love she once felt for Daniel would continue to live on in the generations that came after. After saying goodbye to Madeline, Ryan organized one last special Foster night in her memory. During the event, he played all the songs that marked his journey and shared with the audience the importance of Madeline in his life. Leonard, present at the event, also took to the stage and shared memories of Daniel, completing that cycle of love, longing, and music that marked everyone's lives. The event was a tribute to a woman who not only dedicated her life to art, but who also made sure that Daniel's love and talent were never forgotten. For Ryan, that night represented the culmination of a story that brought different generations together and would continue to inspire many others. Over time, Ryan began to tell the story of his family and Madeline to everyone who crossed his path. He knew that this narrative of love, music and legacy was not just his, but that of all those who loved art. Thus, the names of Daniel Foster and Madeline Lawrence were immortalized, not only in Ryan's music, but in the soul of Harmonia, which continued to be a space of art and memory. For him, the true meaning of music was this: to convey the love, stories, and soul of those who once lived and inspired. And as long as the sound of the piano echoed, his family's love and legacy would live on forever.